responding as if nothing is happening. So it should look like she is already tensed. I feel. So it should happen like it's a course. I have my slides. Today is the course on emerging market, and we will discuss about emerging market. Then, as it's written in the syllabus, we will have 3 or 4 cases. I don't know if we'll have the time, but 1 is on China, 1 is on India, and 2 are on Latin America. This is what I think was in the syllabus. So, but I thought that since there are no readings, we will just speak about what are emerging markets, why emerging markets are different, and how we do business in emerging markets. So, the first question is basically, what are emerging markets? So, what would you think would be some of the factors that define emerging markets? Yeah, high growth. Anything else? Yes?
Country which is quite underdeveloped.
So, mostly underdeveloping, probably. Yeah? Means high GDP growth? Yeah. So, high growth which leads to high GDP?
More employment opportunities?
Are you sure?
I mean, if there's high growth, then kind of people are...
Yeah, so that is a cause, means that is an effect to the cause. But what would be a definition of emerging market? That means that most emerging markets would have these characteristics. So these are generalizable characteristics. Yeah?
Increasing middle class access to consumption.
Increasing middle class, okay. Yeah?
Maybe also a certain degree of stability.
For
example, with regard to corruption and that stuff.
Stability regards to corruption?
For example.
Okay, so stability, instability or stability?
Stability.
Stability.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes?
Economy based more on resources or manufacturing as opposed to service.
Manufacturing, which might go to sourcing, you said? No, manufacturing vis-a-vis services. Yes, services. And here resources are more important to go to services. Yes?
Countries that attract foreign investment.
Countries that attract foreign investment is the cause of the effect. So high growth causes countries, people to. Anything else that might be interesting? Yes, coming.
Usually you have a lot of work power.
Manpower. Manpower, that means more people. And more manpower. That means these countries have population as one of their main factors of influence. Anything else? Interestingly, all the things that you have said are true, but these are not the definition. Why? Because the definition is based on facts which can be replicable. So this guy, Tarun Khanna and Krishna Palepu, defines emerging market as follows. Usually there is information asymmetry, which means that the rich and the poor, they have different informations. That is why rich gets richer and poor gets poorer. Second is misguided regulations, political goals, which is of course everywhere in the world, but in these specific markets, the political goals are misguided for a few, which means that few people can attract resources because of misguided political roles. Third is inefficient judicial system, which means that all these countries would have judicial system, but this would be misguided, which means that some people can take advantage of those, some people cannot. For example, in India, there was a company called Enron, which does not exist today. So Enron opened in Mumbai, near Maharashtra, in Maharashtra, power plant. And when the government changed, they found that the power plant is supplying power at higher cost than the local power plant. So the government questioned why this is so, and the government thought that this is not to be done. And since this is not to be done, the government said, we stop business. So Enron, being a global company, said, if you stop business, then we have invested so many millions of dollars in the country, so how do we take out this money? The government said, okay, go to the court. And in India, most optimistically, it requires around 20 years to solve an issue. 20 years. So this is one issue which is called inefficient judicial system. For example, in China, there's another part of inefficient judicial system where there's an example of this company, McDonald's. So McDonald's in Beijing had a store, their premier store, in front of the Forbidden City. And then Li Ka-shing, who is very powerful in Hong Kong and who has very good friends in the Politburo of China, wanted that space for his hotel, for his office space. So McDonald's said, we are a multinational company, we have signed the contract and we are in this place, so we wouldn't move. So they went to the court, and of course, what would the court say? In China, the court would say that yes, there's a contract, but the government is the real owner of the place. So the government can tell you to leave whenever they want. And so they had to leave. And today, if you visit Beijing, you will see Li Ka-shing's whole space with office space and Hyatt just in front of the Forbidden City. So this is misguided regulation, which is lengthy, cause of market failure, and lack of proper IPR rules, which is intellectual property right, and difficult and different labor laws. An interesting point is why different labor laws or difficult labor laws? Because these countries which we're speaking about do not have usually any social security system. So if you are fired or if you do not have a job, there is no way that you can earn money. For example, in India, there is no social security system. In China, very minor social security system. In Brazil, anyone from Brazil? Not, no one. But again, very limited social security system. And this makes labor laws very difficult, so that you can, difficult to hire and also difficult to fire. So when you have this setup, it's difficult in terms of emerging markets. Having set the stage, there was a report of BRIC. Have you read the report so that I can go a little first? It was first came out in 1993. So BRIC is Brazil, Russia, India, China. And Goldman Sachs got this report out where they said that over the next 50 years, these countries would be a much larger force in the world of economy. If this goes right, in less than 40 years, the BRIC, all these 4 countries would overtake the G6 countries. There's an issue about why G6 and why not G7, but Goldman Sachs thought that G6 would be better, and said that by 2025 they could account for half the size of G6, which is just around the corner, another 15 years, which means that all these countries, the BRIC countries, would overtake the G6. And lastly, the shift in GDP related to the G6 take place steadily over the time, but most dramatic is in the first 30 years, which means that the first 10 years is already done, so the next 20 years will be more dramatic than the first 30 years. And why is this so? Because the countries, China and India, might have, which they perceive or which they think, they might have a GDP which is equivalent or equal to that of the developed nations. So I will do a small calculation for you. Probably you can understand why they say this and why this is so difficult to absorb. So what would be population of India today?
1.2 billion.
So India is 1.2 billion. China 1.3 billion. And what would be 1 billion equal to how many million? 1,000 million. What would be India's per capita income today? Around $1,500. What would be China's per capita today? 3,000. So when you are young, you had a formula like this. Amount is equal to principal into 1 plus R by T, no, R by do you remember this formula? So what is the growth of India and China? Around 8 to 9%. Okay. So I have 2A, I have A, 1 plus 8 to 9% over time. So what is T? 13? 30? That means it will double in 30 years? No. Usually money doubles in 14 years. But no, money doubles in 5 years if it is 14% interest. So you keep the 100 euro in the bank, or 100 rupees, or $100, it becomes 200 in 5 years if it has 14% compound interest. And here we are talking about 8 to 9%. So let's say time is equal to around 8 years. So in how many years? So what is the average GDP of developed nations? Around $30,000. So when will 1500 become 30,000 and 3000 become 30,000? Sorry? You have to calculate. 3000 in 8 years become 6000. In 16 years become 12. In another 8 years, 24 years become 24. Another 8 years, 32 years become 48. Too much. So 24 and half, let's say. So how many years? This one? 36? 8? Only 8 more. So in 36 years, 2.6 billion people would earn this much money. Which means what? This is how much money? Compared to France, what is the population?
55 million.
Germany? Whole of Europe?
5 and something.
What is the growth rate?
1.5.
2. It's around 1% average. So 50 will become how much? 55 maximum? Into? Now you're 30, at that age, at that point probably 50 if growth happens. So this is 1/4 or 1/5. So whole of Europe would have this amount of money. And India would have 1.3 billion, probably it will be more than 1.3 billion, and China will be more per 1.3 billion. And this will be the scenario. So why they are saying that? Because they're saying that the largest economies in the world may be longer the richest. Higher growth may lead to higher returns and increased demand for capital. And rising incomes may also see these economies move through a sweet spot. For example, this year, the largest number of millionaires is already in Asia. So US and Europe have been already surpassed. As today's advanced economies become a shrinking part of the world economy, the accompanying shifts in spending could provide significant growth opportunities, and that is why we only talk about emerging markets today. Why? One way to understand this is because the growth is here. And in Lafarge, what did we say? We said, how is value created? You did the Lafarge case, right? So how is value created? Profit plus, the CEO said, into. So the multiplication or the addition is basically what creates the value. So if you have, that is what I think we have forgotten probably, but if you are a very big company, if you're a very large company and you have no growth, what will happen to that company? Large company, no growth. Large company, no growth. What will you do with that company? What will happen? Yes, competition, go ahead, what will happen? There will be takeover. Why? Because it's not growing, but it's large. So someone might want to take it over and do something else with that company. If you're very small and very good, what will happen? Also, you'll be acquired. So the question is, how do you manage this together is what we saw in Lafarge, which means that the growth was an imperative. If you don't grow, someone will acquire. If you stay stagnant and you are small and very good, someone will acquire. So the only way to have is both. So that is what they're saying is, with the shrinking part of the world economy, most of the companies would try to find sweet spots, which are small companies or big companies in this part of the world, because the growth is happening here and not in the old economy. So what will happen is, this is how it looks like. What they said is, this is China overtaking these countries. So China has already overtaken UK, already overtaken Germany. This year they overtook Japan. This is 2015, and we are today at 2010. So already it is going so fast. That means what they projected is now behind, which means that it's growing faster. So India would overtake Italy, would overtake France, would overtake Germany, would overtake Japan within this. If you see, our target is for India 36 years. So 2010 plus 36 is around 2046. But this they told in 1993. So 7 years have gone by. I think, can you see? Okay. You see, if there are cameras, such a quiet class, it's nice, no? You don't have to say stop speaking, everyone is attentive. It's good. Okay, so what is happening? So 2015, already 10 years, already means 5 years before, and for India, we'll cross Japan in 2032. So basically already it is 5 years ahead of time. So basically it will be within this, it will be 2025. So another projection would be larger GDP when together 2025 BRIC economies will be half by 2040. So we said 28 plus 10, today's 2010, plus 28 is 2038. So they are projecting 2040. And if you see the largest economies in 2050, which is what we predict for India, 36 plus 10, 46, is first is China, then in the US, and then in India. This is what BRIC analyzed and spoke about after much research, which was one of the highest downloaded report in the history of Goldman Sachs. So this is India and this is China, the red one, and India is the green one. Also some projections in China, what takes the G6 around 2030, that is what we say, 28 plus 10 around 30, but of course that is, if the growth is at 9%, it will create more and more energy for growth within the time period, and India would be around 2040 or 2044, that is 36 plus 10, 36 plus 7 years, which is 2040. And if you see, India's rapid growth potential is here, whereas this is China and that is India. But India is far lesser than China because China started the liberalization policy when? But this is an important concept, liberalization. What is liberalization?
Opening of the economy.
Opening of the economy. So China started in 1970? Yeah, 70s, but 78. And India started 1991. So China is around 12 to 13 years ahead of India in liberalization. So what does liberalization mean? Opening up. What does opening up mean? Allowing foreign direct investment to come in different sectors. When this happens, how countries get richer? Someone said something a little bit before about, you said about industrialization and about manufacturing versus services. So usually what happens is the growth story happens in a country is agriculture. First people are interested in agriculture, and then there is an industrial revolution. So they start manufacturing. And when they have manufactured much, they move from manufacturing to services. For, let's say, for the UK. Why UK do not have any manufacturing companies anymore? All have been sold. And what UK, main industry in UK is today? Finance and banking. Main industry in most developed nations, for example, Japan. Of course, they have manufacturing, but again, it would be like, let's say, 45, 35, 10, or 45, 35, 20 would be the ratio of agriculture, would be a ratio of services, manufacturing, and agriculture. So as a crude example, assuming that China's GDP growth continued to grow at 8%, so they have targeted 8%, but today China is more than 9% continuously. Next 3 decades would lead to prediction that China's economy would be 3 times larger than the US in US dollar terms. And if Japan, if you see, in 1960 and 70, Japan was growing at this stage. In 1780, 5%, 80 to 94%, and 90 to 2000, stagnation. And this is a discussion that no one has able to solve. Many people have given many theories why Japan is stagnating. It's called stagflation, which means that there is less of inflation, there is some inflation, but it's stagnant. Huge amount of reserves, but they cannot utilize the reserves to increase money. An interesting point here. If you have money in the, let's say, if you have plenty of gold ornaments in your locker, what does it mean for the economy? Very good. So you are keeping money out of the flow. So if you have plenty of money, cash, in your vault, what does it mean? It means it's outside the economy. It is called black money. Why it's called black money? One way to understand that is it is not counted for in the economy. Now that is called high velocity money, which means that the more money circulates, it's economics, microeconomics. The more money circulates, the larger it becomes. So for Japan, it's a big issue because they have huge amount. What is the amount? 13 trillion, I think. 13 trillion yen in the post office only. And then similar amount in the bank. But they don't know where to invest. They can invest abroad, but this money is not generating any funds. And this is a big question which many economists, social scientists have tried to argue, that why Japan is not growing at the rate that it should have grown before. So one precursor to this question is, can China and India become like Japan? So some people who do not want China and India to become this would like to say they can also stop. Some people would also say that there will be 4th World War or 3rd World War. The fourth is little late, third World War, and this could not happen. Some people would say that, okay, because both China and India more so, this economy is around 30% is in agriculture. So it depends on the rainfall. So if there is too much of rainfall, what will happen? Floods. If there is less rainfall, drought. So again, the economy will not grow at the percentage that we want them to grow, which is at 8 to 9%. So these are all the issues that they have already taken into account and said that these are the assumptions of the model. And of course, there's a big issue of labor force, which means that where will the people who will work in the next generation will come from? So if you see, everyone is declining. Brazil is declining, Russia is declining, only India is less declining than the rest. Why is China also declining? Anyone?
The single child.
One child policy for so long, which means that they have controlled by some way, which is an autocratic way of growth. So this is China and this is India. So India is also declining, but at a much lesser rate. Whereas projected population growth rate, this is China and this is India. So India will have more population than China in the next 10 to 20 years. So the rationale for emerging markets, which means that there is a market potential. I won't go into the details of this graph, but there is a market potential and there is country risk. And of course, companies would like to understand this together to say why they would like to go in this market. So the bigger the circle, the bigger it is lucrative for a company to go. And this is only for companies which are food, drink, and tobacco business. But if you see, also rationale for emerging market would be it has time for around 2 years to break even. Also more than 5 years to achieve return on investment. And also more than 2 years to have significant EBITDA before they can come out. So which means that these markets are not so easy as we think when we think that this to do business in. Following that, what some companies would like to do, or some companies did before, is having a scope or having a way to identify emerging markets as business parameters, which means that all emerging markets are the same. That is why the BRIC report. Why they should have a BRIC report? They should have a Brazil report, Russia report, India report, China report. And within India, there is so much of diversity. Within China, there is so much of diversity. But we group them into emerging markets. And some companies thought and did mistakes. So what are those mistakes? How not to grow in emerging market, which means that you should never do that today in emerging market. One, sell old products. Because with internet, anyone can know which product is in the market. So if you try to sell old products, they will discard you, or they will say that you are thinking that this market is not important for you than other markets. Sell existing products with reduced functionality, which means that you are trying to cash out on cost. But there could be people, as we said in our emerging market definition, that there might be people who can afford this amount of money, but you don't know. Accept a lower product quality, which means that you launch a Mercedes S-Class 350 series here, and then you send to India, let's say, Mercedes S-Class 10 series. So people would say, why is this so? Use old product technology to develop local products, which is again, people would question because these markets are becoming more and more important, and ignore major differences between and within emerging market countries, which we just said. An interesting story. In a small city in India, in the north part of the country, called Aurangabad. Aurangabad is in the middle. And then in the western part, there's a city called Ahmedabad. So Mercedes and BMW are now very focused in markets like India and China. So there are small and medium-sized enterprises who have now a huge amount of money. So one day, I don't know why, it came out in the news that in Aurangabad, 100 small and medium-sized business guys came together. They usually are in a club, they usually go out to play golf together, but they are competitors anyways. But they all came together and said that we would buy 100 cars, the top range Mercedes or BMW. And which company is going to give me 20% discount? So you are the international manager in India, right? And you have an opportunity of selling the latest brand 100 units at one go. So what will you do? And it's the latest model, it's not the previous model. Yes, Camille?
It might not be a good move, and I don't know if it's usual for car companies to give such a discount.
No, it's not usual.
That was brand made.
Yes, everything.
So once that price is established, then it will be difficult for them to go back to the original price.
But I want to sell 100. So what would you do? So you say no, right? In Norway, what would you do?
How You would probably not sell.
In Germany,
You wouldn't sell? Yeah.
not sell. In the US, you don't know. In Japan, in France, give some gifts, but do not reduce the price.
Yeah.
So exactly BMW said no, we can't give this discount. Mercedes said yes, and they sold 100. Those who bought Mercedes, when they wanted to pay, they couldn't pay because the Mercedes system wouldn't take a 20% discount because they had never had a 20% discount in the history. After Aurangabad, Ahmedabad did the same thing. Again, 100 people, 100 small and medium-sized enterprises asked for one-day discount. BMW said, not possible. Mercedes said, what? Yes. Again, sold 100. Yesterday, search BMW in India or Mercedes in India. Today, no one is having their computers open. It's a good sign. But if you search yesterday, another city, I don't remember the city, but it's probably Aurangabad, BMW sold 100 at 20% discount. In one go, what would you? How many units will you sell in a country at a range of 100,000 euros per unit? How many?
A year? Or?
A year. When you go for your consulting interview, this is a question, how many telephone booths are there in Paris? So how do you analyze that? How many telephone booths are there in Paris?
You compare like in terms of arrondissement.
Okay, so how many arrondissements you have? 20. In one arrondissement, you take an assumption, how many street corners are there? So you go on taking assumptions. And assumptions might be wrong, but at least you can come to a number. But if I say how many telephone booths, how do I answer, right? So here also you take assumption. What do you think in a country?
Which country?
India. Because it's 100,000, right? It's a huge amount of money.
5,000?
5,000 cars? So this is your homework for next day. Just check how many units are sold in a country. In Singapore, how many units are sold? In Paris, how many? Just a figure. And you can come to that figure. For example, in France, you can come to that figure. Let's say how many Renault, Peugeot, and Citroën are sold in France. How do you come to that figure?
That's the number of years you use your car.
So 10 years, your car gets obsolete. And then how many people have, Camille said we have 65 million people. How many people, what percentage of people have cars in France? 90%, right? Yes, 80 to 90% people. So 80% of, let's say average, 80% of 65 million would be 50 million. So if it's 50 million, and what is the age profile of this 50 million? Population growth is less than 1% or 1%. So this is mainly around the age of 40, 44. So that means they have already used 10 years. So how many? 3-4 million cars?
If you have 33 or 34 million people.
So but it's family. So divide by 3 or 4. So 10 million. So this is how we calculate. I'm just giving you an indication. So if you see 100 is probably 6 months sale. So maximum you will sell 300 units in this category, and you can sell in one day 100. So this is a new model that has business which has come up in this year. No one understood this model before. So it requires a dedicated approach. So if you are an international manager, it is very difficult to understand this and to take a decision. But once others have taken a decision, you want to jump on the bandwagon, and that is why dedicated approach is needed. For example, global product, if you have a product, you can sell it without any local adaptation, which is the high-end market. Global product adapted to local needs, mid-segment, same volume, potential, you can sell. Global product which has innovations launched in emerging markets, which is a potential market coverage, for example, decorative light bulbs, again you can sell. And local market product, total market coverage, like a mixer grinder, like small utensils, you can sell. But these are to be adapted for the local market. For example, Philips tried to sell mixer grinder in India. Do you think the mixer grinder that you sell in Europe would be suitable for India? No. Why no? First, you don't need the same thing, then you use it every day. In Europe, do you use mixer grinder every day? No. In India, they use every day. So it has to be much hardy, it has to be much more power, it has to be durable, it has to be adaptable. And this, which companies, when they find, probably, they have to think and innovate and produce that for that market. Why they have to produce for that market? How many people would buy mixer grinder in India? Number. Everyone means.
1 million, 1 billion.
So I have to take an India class now. India is a poor country. 35% of the population is below the, today 25% is below the poverty line, which means that they cannot eat one meal a day, which means that 250 million you don't count. After that there's a family which is around another 100, 150, 200 million, and then 300 million would be middle class, and then 100 million would be the upper class, and then the super rich would be 10 million or 15 million. So you're talking about a 300 million market. So compared to Europe, 300 million means most of continental Europe. So if you are not investing in that market with new products, where will you invest? So EMs are new market space, and it is very important that one thinks about this market space as a new market space and invest there. So some challenges, opportunities, identifications: build, plan and execute, resourcing and staffing, managing synergies, and priority setting is very important when you do something on emerging market. Of course, need for different governance models are required, because there is a difference between, we talked about this before. Which case did we talk about? Conflict, headquarter versus subsidiary? KFC, very good. So EM requires again co-creation, which is a discussion between the company and the people who would like to buy that. A very interesting slide by Boston Consulting Group in India. If you see which is the youngest country in the world, South Africa. Which is the oldest? Japan. After that is Germany, UK, France. So going by this, there are 350 million citizens which are under age of 15. So if you want to have products made for them, made for this population, which is the market? If you want to make products which are for senior citizens, which is your market? If you want to make products for the young, which is the market? So this is what they try to analyze. And also they try to analyze where is the population which can travel and which is excess population which can work. So this is the model which they have come up. It is the potential workforce surplus is calculated in the ratio of working population age group between 15 and 59 to the total population. India will have around 47 million people in the working age population by 2020 compared to today, while France will have a deficit of 3 million. So all these are minus. So, and all the yellows are just about okay for them to manage. So if you have this, why is China minus 10? We said this before, because of single child. And in 2020, after 2020, so logically Boston Consulting India thinks that these people would move to different countries because you have no people who will work in those countries. Of course, this means that the work means not high-tech, of course it means some people will do that, but of course they mean that the lower rung category of workers will be from this type of countries. Yes?
Why is it so low for the US?
Why is it so low for the US? Minus 17. US is a country which has the highest, probably the highest number of immigrants, and immigration policies are very liberal. Why? Because of this. Japan, yes. In France, what is the cap on immigration? There's a cap. You cannot come to Japan, you cannot come to France to work just like that. They control immigration. In Japan, the most difficult. You can't have first 2 passports. You cannot marry a Japanese just to change passports. You can have only one type of visa, which means that there's an interesting story. The first time I went to Japan in 2003, I was in a party. Did I tell you the story? I was in a ESSEC party where they invited a lot of ESSEC friends, and a guy came and asked me, are you a cook or an IT professional? In 2003, for Japanese people, Indians meant either a cook or IT professional. So this time I asked the same question. Do you think I'm a cook or a IT? No, you are from IIT. Because now with more discussion, they know some terminology like IITs, like IIMs, that they can be engineers from India. Because it's a very close country. And it is difficult country, different country, entirely different from the rest of the world. So very low immigration. Very low, so it's minus 9 million. And the more the age, the difficult it becomes for Japanese people. So I think I stop here and we take a break and then we come back and talk about the cases that we have. 4 cases we'll do.
sample MBA lecture. And joining us today is Professor Darren Dahl, the man to my left. Professor Dahl is one of our top professors here at the Solar School of Business. He's the Fred H. Siller Professor in Applied Marketing Research and the Associate Professor of Marketing. He received his PhD in Marketing from the University of British Columbia and had a BCom in Accounting from the University of Alberta. His research interests focus on new product design and development, creativity, consumer product adoption, the role of social influence in consumer behaviour, and understanding the role of self-conscious emotions in consumption. His work is widely published in the Journal of Marketing Research, Journal of Marketing, Journal of Consumer Research, Management Science, and the Journal of Consumer Psychology. I can tell you from having spoken to a lot of the students who study on the MBA programme that they love Darren, and his classes are always oversubscribed. So I'm really pleased that he's able to join us today.
No pressure.
So now I'm going to pass you over to the man himself, Professor Dahl. Thank you.
Thank you. So it's really my pleasure to be here today. They've asked me to give you a little bit of the taste of what it would be like to be in the MBA program. And so that's what we're going to do. I'm going to try to, at least, break down a case analysis with you in the MBA program where we look at a real situation that happened a few years ago, and we try to understand some aspect of business by seeing what happened. Now, the big part of a case analysis is it's not just somebody up at the front lecturing. It's actually you guys doing most of the talking. And so that's what's going to happen. I'm going to play it just like we play it. And so that means I'll be asking you questions. So I may say to this man right here, what do you think? And he'll be like, bang, and he'll have an answer, and it'll be amazing, right? And we'll be like, oh, I want to sit by that guy, right? Because he's got game. But I may ask a question, boom, and you have no idea because you were just still thinking about lunch and how you wanted one of those other boxes and you made a bad choice, right? You got the bad sandwich, you should have got the other one. So you're not sure. So if that's the case, right, at least the way I play in my classes, you can look to the right, look to the left, check out who's looking better today, right? And then just throw them under the bus. And just say, you know what, she's going to take it today, okay? So if I ask you a question in the next 30, 45 minutes and you don't have a clue, it's okay to push it left, push it right, and see what they say. Now, if they don't know, it'll just continue to pass along until it gets to some of the administration on the side. Okay? Is that fair game? All right. Now, my goal is, because I'm a marketing professor, to kind of leave you with a takeaway. And when we teach a case, that's really what it's about. Is you listen, you learn, you engage, and you walk out of the room, right? And you got something you can hang on to. Because bottom line, when you do any of these education programs, right? MBA, BCom, anything at university, and most of you, of course, have a degree already, you don't remember everything that you learned. Hopefully you remember a few key takeaways, right? Each class that you take should give you something you put in the toolbox and you can use downstream. So today, I'm going to try to give you a takeaway, okay? So if nothing else, you walk out of today with something that you can put in the toolbox that you'll always remember. So the case today, okay? Now I want to get a general reaction today, is the case that I chose is about this product and this product. Never heard of them. I don't believe that for a second. So this is an interesting and fascinating story, okay? And this is a case put out by the Harvard Business School. Harvard Business School is one of the biggest case providers in the world, and they put out cases every year. Hundreds of cases, actually. And then we use them in our teaching throughout the world in all the different MBA programs. This is an interesting product. Why? What do you think? Ivan, sit on the front row. I love it. People like sex. Okay. This is a very bold class. So Ivan says, this is an important product because people like sex. And I guess that's true, obviously. Why do we know that's true? How successful are these products? Any 3 or 4 years did Viagra sell? How much money did Pfizer bring in because of this product? Any guesses? What do you got?
Wasn't it in a single billion, like 4 billion, something like that?
He's even higher. You're with him in the front row. But it was $1 billion a year. So if you look across the 3 or 4 years, $1 billion every year for this product, Viagra, right? That's amazing. And so when Viagra came to market, though, right, it was a little scared. Why was it scared to bring this new product to market? Any ideas? It was a huge success, right? $1 billion every year. Yay! Why were they scared, though? It's taboo. You mean sex is taboo? She's like, yeah, it is. Yeah. It was a product coming to market that was a bit sensitive, right? And so if you're the marketer and you've got this great new product and you're like, oh, this is going to be $1 billion product, right? But we got some fears because it's a taboo. People don't talk about it, right? What is it that we don't talk about? What does Viagra do?
Entrepreneur Sir Richard Branson is mostly recognised for his Virgin Airlines, megastores and media outlets. But there is so much more to Richard than meets the eye.
What he does is incredible. It's always great when you get to meet people who have lived fortunate lives, who turn that around and actually look outside from themselves, and he causes change.
Richard Unite is Richard Branson's charitable arm of his company. The whole night is in honor of Richard's mother Eve, who has really been a force behind Richard his whole life.
I would never allowed him to be think about himself. I would, when he was a little boy, if he looked shy, I said, "You look shy? You're thinking of yourself, don't you? Yeah, think of yourself." So he's always made to think of how to ask people.
Branson's public demeanour is far from shy. He lives a rock star lifestyle and has a lot of fun along the way.
It's great. You meet a lot of people that are very successful businessmen, and they act and behave like successful businessmen. And he really acts a lot more like an artist. He's a very creative thinker. He reminds me of a hippie, actually.
In his early years, he was a hippie, but now a major player on the world stage, he can truly make a difference.
What Virgin Atlantic is planning to do is to start scheduled services to Iraq and get Iraq back on its feet again.
Richard's influence is felt all around the world, and he uses his profile to raise awareness of HIV/AIDS.
We've all got to do everything we can as citizens to try to prevent people getting it, i.e. to try to warn young people of the need to wear condoms in order that they don't pick up the disease.
He was awarded a knighthood in 1999 for his contribution to entrepreneurship.
There's a big responsibility goes with that, but I was going to have to live up to it, because generally icons at some stage mess up and let people down, so I'm going to continue to enjoy life and hope not to put my foot in it too often.
First and foremost, he is a loving father to his children Holly and Sam, and devoted husband to wife Joan. An adventurer at heart, he's made several world record-breaking attempts and always promotes an environmental message.
It is designed to capture data and damage to the ozone layer without adding to it.
Sir Richard Branson is an incredibly unique modern-day industrialist who's fueled by raw instinct. Virgin is one of the world's most recognized and diverse brands. With more than 300 companies worldwide, it employs approximately 50,000 people in 30 countries. The product range is as wide and wild as Richard's imagination. Ranging from planes to trains, cola, radio...
Virgin Broadcasting is now officially on the air!
To health, Formula One, media, mobile telephones, financial services and music, to name just a few. If you're a consumer, Virgin is competing for your business everywhere you turn. But what may have flown under your radar is Branson's tireless drive to improve the environment, society, and give generously to humanitarian causes. In the past, Branson was skeptical about global warming, but after a breakfast meeting with former American Vice President Al Gore, that all changed. Branson, so concerned about the reality of global warming, has committed to investing 100% of the profits from Virgin's transportation companies over the next 10 years. This investment is expected to reach $3 billion. Branson appealed to the aviation industry to work together to tackle the serious problem of climate change.
I think now there is the sense of urgency out there to do something about it, and the feedback we've got from the letters that we sent out to the industry make me believe that we can get the industry to get its act together. Having said that, if the industry doesn't get its act together, if there are ideas that can save considerable amounts of CO2, then the government should impose some of these things onto the industry.
The aviation industry contributes around 3% of the world's CO2 emissions. Surprisingly, the airline boss suggests that people should consider other forms of transportation rather than using planes.
When there are trains as alternatives, there is a question mark about, I think, the future of domestic flights and whether more domestic flights should take place in the future, and that's something for governments to decide. Because if there is an adequate train service, people shouldn't have to jump on a plane, and there are a lot of places in the world where people are taking planes on relatively short journeys.
The main thrust of his $3 billion investment is focused on research and the development of biofuels to power airliners.
This is the fuel, and this is today's, in a sense, an experiment. I mean, this fuel is basically made up of bagasse oil, which comes from the rainforest. And one of the positive things about that is that if airlines start using the nuts out of the rainforest, people are not going to want to cut down the rainforest because there's going to be good money to be made out of the rainforest. And then it's also got a mixture of coconut oil. Oh, one pair of coconuts. And there are massive coconut plantations all over the world that have just got their coconuts lying on the sand and rotting. And the kinds of places that you plant coconuts, you can't really plant anything else. So it's a good, sustainable mixture of fuel. We should be able to make enough of this kind of fuel to power most of the Virgin Atlantic fleet and maybe a certain number of other airlines that we're involved in around the world. I doubt there'll be enough quantity of fuel to power every single airline in the world. So we then need to develop something, I suspect, a fuel based on algae. And I think an algae-based fuel should be able to power all planes in the world. What we're doing today is to prove that a clean fuel, or a percentage of a clean fuel, can actually fly at 35,000 feet safely, and it can work. In the past, people have said that ethanol freezes at 15,000 feet, and therefore you're never going to be able to get a biofuel to be used on a 747, but we've overcome that problem. So the next step will be then to get the Civil Aviation Authority's permission to continue to use this fuel, and we'll obviously be applying for that. And then we've got to get out there and get people into the rainforest, picking nuts and get them into the coconut plantation picking nuts and start creating the fuel. So we are talking realistically, I suspect, a couple of years away.
The pioneering demonstration flight flew between London and Amsterdam, with one engine being powered with 80% jet fuel and 20% biofuel.
the reason only one's being powered by the biofuel is that this plane costs $160 million. It's flying over a lot of houses with people in it, and it's an experiment. I mean, it's we have obviously tested it on the ground as best you can with Boeing and GE, but it's never flown at 30,000 feet before, and therefore we want to have our plane back.
Branson's investment into biofuels is not huge when compared to the wealth of the oil and coal companies he is competing against. His big picture vision for the future is one of a sustainable world for future generations.
You have two choices. One, you just sit back and carry on using the dirty fuel and do nothing about it, or you do what Virgin Atlantic is doing. We put 100% of all the profits we make from our airlines into trying to develop clean new fuels for planes, for cars, for buses, and that's the choice. That's the choice we're making. So I believe that we can bring about a breakthrough. I don't know how long it's going to take, but today is a very, very important first step. But it is only a step, and so we are I think, still talking about being some years away before all planes in the sky are flying without emitting dirty carbon.
While the jury is still out on biofuels in the scientific community, Richard is yet again putting his money where his mouth is, being an industry leader that follows his instinct. If it works on planes, why not trains? It was a Virgin train that was the first to run on biodiesel in the UK. It's biodegradable and produces less CO2 than conventional diesel.
It's a big step towards trains becoming completely green. We've got 20% biodiesel on this train. We think we can get up to 100%, which basically will mean that it'll be the equivalent of taking 100,000 cars off the road. We want to try to make train journeys completely carbon neutral. They're already 76% more efficient than cars and planes, but this would make a massive extra difference.
Branson was joined at London's Euston Station by then Prime Minister in waiting, Gordon Brown. The government wanted to see a reduction in transport's carbon dioxide emissions, and Richard was leading the way.
Obviously, Gordon Brown's pleased because he, as are the other leaders, committed to trying to deal with the problems of global warming, trying to have a greener planet, a planet that our children and grandchildren can grow up in the same way that we have done. He said, "You move very quickly on it," and I think we have moved pretty quickly on it.
Back in 1987, he launched Mates Condoms to raise awareness of safe sex for young people.
They are going to have relationships, which I think we almost assume that they will, and we recommend that they protect themselves.
The distribution of condoms was widened from just pharmacies to retailers such as supermarkets and clothes stores. Affordability was improved by halving the price of existing brands. Richard later sold the rights of Mates Condoms for £1 million, donating the sale amount to charity. Branson is a seasoned campaigner when it comes to publicity stunts to get his message across.
Right, you're going to have to help me.
Together with Paula Abdul, they invented a multi-faith celebration to promote AIDS awareness.
Thank you very much.
We made it up. I can't even pronounce it having made it up, but it's a mixture of Christianity, Jewish and Muslim religions, and a few others thrown in as well.
This ornament right here costs $1, that's it. And it benefits the Youth AIDS organization and helps spread the word and educate and prevent HIV with young people.
The dynamic duo kicked off the fundraising with their donation of $10,000 to Youth AIDS.
All of us need to do everything we can to try to reverse the problem on a global basis, reverse what's become a horrible trend.
Happy Christmas, Hanukkah. Cheers.
In a more formal setting, Branson teamed up with Peter Gabriel to initiate the Global Elders Organization. This group of elder statesmen and women include Archbishop Tutu, Jimmy Carter, and Nelson Mandela.
AIDS affects people of all ages, but in particular, it affects young people.
The Elders' goal is to solve global problems including climate change, poverty, and HIV/AIDS.
We've all got to do everything we can as citizens to try to prevent people getting it, or try to campaign to raise more money for research to try to stamp this disease out.
Richard joined Mandela at Robben Island, the prison where the former South African president was held during apartheid. They were there to promote the historic 4664 concert that was staged in Cape Town. Virgin helped ensure the success of the event that raised critical funds for South Africa's AIDS crisis by providing free flights for many international artists.
A gathering of very special people, but special also because their faith and fortune cannot remove them from caring and compassion.
Another positive footprint was left in South Africa when he launched the Richard Branson School of Entrepreneurship. This virtually free university offers disadvantaged individuals an education at a fraction of the cost of other universities.
Africa's a wonderful place, and it's been through so much misery, and Taddy said something wonderful earlier. I mean, he mentioned all these handouts from America, and but he actually ended by saying, empires do not last forever, and maybe in 50 or 60 or 70 years' time, America will be coming hat in hand to South Africa.
At the heart of Richard's humanitarian work is Virgin Unite. His foundation focuses on solving social and environmental problems ranging from combating the spread of disease in Africa to economic empowerment and education initiatives. Branson regularly hosts gala charity auctions to raise funds for the numerous charities that Virgin Unite supports.
Well, I was on a Virgin plane a few years ago, and I was walking down the aisle, and this lovely lady grabbed me and sat me down on the seat next to her and told me all about fistula. And tonight we're trying to raise money to teach doctors how to do the operation, and also raise money to do the operations themselves.
Richard's network in the entertainment industry brings star power to the foundation. Virgin Unite ambassadors like singer Natalie Imbruglia raise the profile of the causes he supports.
These evenings are great because they raise money for a very worthy cause. I've had lots of trips out to Nigeria and we're doing great work out there and we're seeing a lot of progress. So events like tonight just go towards the programs that we're actually working on.
Hey, I'll support Richard anytime for all the work that he's doing, and Natalie I know and came to support her, and you know, just this event I think it's really important. There's a lot of homeless youth in America at the moment, and at a time when a lot of us are thinking about our own money or loss of money and our own troubles, I think it's important to remember there are other people out there who are having more difficulty than we are. So.
Tonight is called Rock the Kasbah, and it's to raise money for these indigenous people that live in the Atlas Mountains of Morocco. The whole night is in honor of Richard's mother, Eve.
The Eve Branson Foundation aims to improve the lives of women and young girls in Morocco through education, business and healthcare.
She went looking up in the mountains and fell in love with this beautiful Kasbah called the Kasbah Tamadon. And she came down one day and said, look, if I'm going to wait for you anymore to go up in your bloody balloon, you're going to have to buy the Kasbah, and I'll look after all the people in my local area. So anyway, that's what happened.
The Rock the Kasbah event has proved to be wonderfully popular and has raised hundreds of thousands of dollars for Eve's charity. Stars still come out to play, even when Branson is not in attendance.
I knew that he was going to do this. He told me about this a while back. He is somewhere in the middle of the Atlantic, setting a new world record with his son and his daughter, Holly and Sam.
I thought he was going to be here, but he lost his paddle.
Although he was seabound in a bid to beat a transatlantic sailing record, Richard did take the time to call.
How is everything on the boat? Are you guys going to break this record?
Well, we're doing our best. It's all been going extremely well, but we just have got into weather that is perhaps a little bit too strong for the boat. We're not sure whether we're going to manage it this time, but we're giving it our best shot, and we'll see how we go.
Richard, all of us in this room right now is raising our glasses to you. You're going to make it!
Unfortunately, Richard, Sam, Holly and crew were forced to scrap their transatlantic record attempt after the yacht was severely damaged by a storm just 2 days into their trek. Helicopters have rescued Richard on numerous occasions from his ill-fated record attempts. These experiences motivated him to sponsor a much-needed air ambulance that would come to the aid of others.
Been rescued for 4 occasions by helicopters and various mad escapades out of the sea, and I felt I needed to give something back and say thank you. And London, believe it or not, did not have a fully funded air ambulance service.
Since the air ambulance first began, trauma deaths in London and on the M25 motorway have fallen by more than 50%. Virgin contributes £175,000 annually to the service. Branson flexes his industrial muscle to mount political pressure on world leaders for the betterment of Africa. In the lead up to the 2005 G8 meeting, he chartered a Virgin Atlantic flight to Edinburgh for about 150 international activists.
We thought it was important to bring people from America, from Africa, from London to Scotland. This plane is full of people from the One Campaign in America, from Make Poverty History in London, from masses of different organisations. Today it's basically been to bring all the charity workers who will make an enormous difference in Africa if the G8 can write out a cheque for something like $50 billion.
Richard is a man that makes a positive difference to our world thanks to the success of his global group of companies. But the Virgin Empire was not built overnight. A dyslexic, Branson dropped out of school aged 16. His headmaster predicted that Richard would either go to prison or become a millionaire. In fact, he achieved both of these feats. After setting up a student magazine, he founded Virgin as a mail-order music retailer. The success of this business enabled him to open Virgin record stores in the UK. But Branson was arrested for tax evasion and charged for selling records that had been declared export stock. Richard spent a night in jail and was fined £60,000. His mother put up her home as security against the debt. Branson bounced back from the lowest point of his life and launched his Virgin record label and built a recording studio. He signed an unwanted Mike Oldfield to Virgin, and his album Tubular Bells was a hit, selling 5 million copies. The biggest music acts in the world now flocked to the label. Branson had achieved his dream of a vertically integrated music company. Virgin stores could now promote the bands that Virgin Music had signed. Richard had truly arrived on the world stage as a major player. Today, his Virgin megastores can be found all around the world. His colourful personality draws huge media and public interest when opening new stores.
Most people would say anybody who's opening a music store in this day and age needs to be seen by a shrink, because most music stores are going bankrupt and closing down.
Where others see a market in decay, Branson widens his vision and finds new opportunities. opportunities.
Virgin's got a strong brand, and I think we're quite good at reinventing ourselves.
Richard moves with the times and often leads the world in new technologies.
Well, hello, good morning, and thanks very much for coming.
He launched Virgin Digital, a music download service, by being downloaded into the Oxford Street branch of a Virgin megastore. He appeared in a holographic form in London, despite being thousands of miles away in the Caribbean.
The way to compete with downloading is either set up a downloading company yourself, which we have with Virgin Digital, or create an environment in a store which is actually worth going to. I mean, people do still like to get out of their flats and their houses and go and have an experience. And I think coming into a Virgin megastore is an experience. And I think we'll surprise people with the kind of taste that we've got, not just in music, but in other products as well. We still like to think we've got the best music selection of any store. But we've decided to have some of the hippest fashion, the best books, the best players, the best films, etc., etc. So we've now broadened the range, and I think it's going to work well.
Richard's love of music and having a good time is also lived out through the V Festival, an annual music event that is staged in the United Kingdom. His son Sam promotes the event and dreams of taking it abroad.
I think it does not support from here. There's no reason why in the future we can't expand and have thousands more people around, even in America, enjoying the concerts and festival, and then if in time maybe even China, India, South Africa, Australia.
Branson uses his music industry contacts for the greater good. He was instrumental in Elton John's recording of Candle in the Wind for Princess Diana's funeral, which raised £40 million for charity.
And over the last week, we've been quietly talking to the musicians that are close to her, and everybody's felt the same. There hasn't been one musician we've talked to who hasn't felt strongly enough to write a song or want to participate. For instance, Paul McCartney just phoned up 5 minutes ago to volunteer a beautiful song that he's just written, which he feels would be absolutely appropriate.
While music launched Richard onto the world stage as an entrepreneur, his bold move into the aviation industry demonstrated his courage and belief in his raw instincts.
I think the heart in business must come first. You must have a passion for something. I mean, for instance, when I decided to start an airline 19 years ago, Virgin Atlantic, the heart said that there must be a better way of running an airline than all the airlines I flew on. The service was abysmal, and I thought I could create something really special. The head and the accountants were telling me I was off my head, and that I should see somebody to examine my head, because somebody once said to me the easiest way of becoming a millionaire is to start off as a billionaire and go into the airline business.
Virgin Atlantic is the quintessential Virgin story, which rose to David and Goliath proportions. In 1984, Richard set up the headquarters of Virgin Atlantic in a houseboat in London's Little Venice. Armed with a single plane bound to challenge the likes of British Airways, even this brash entrepreneur was nervous on the morning of the maiden flight of his airline.
I hope and feel we've got our figures right. I may be horribly wrong, and I might have made a dreadful mistake, but unless we try, we definitely won't succeed, so we might as well have a try.
Virgin Atlantic almost didn't get off the ground. On the inaugural flight, a flock of birds flew into an uninsured engine. The cost of £600,000 came close to bankrupting the company. Branson had another problem that day.
No, you can't have my passport. I've forgotten it. Right, we'll have to do something about that.
Between 1984 and 1990, Virgin Atlantic operated on a small scale with only a handful of planes. The airline's aim was to provide the highest quality of innovative service at excellent value for money for all classes of travellers. In time, the concept was a hit. The Virgin fleet expanded and began flying out of Heathrow. In 1993, it made history by winning Airline of the Year for the third consecutive time.
For the 1993 Airline of the Year is Virgin Atlantic.
Anyway, I'd just like to say thanks very much to all the Virgin staff for making this possible. And they sound like cheerleaders tonight, so excuse them for a bit noisy bunch as well, but anyway, thank you.
This victory was made even sweeter given the circumstances. Arch-enemy British Airways had been running a dirty tricks campaign against Virgin that involved BA poaching Virgin's passengers and tampering with its computer files. The controversy would be fought out in the High Court.
Richard, this way. How do you think it'll be to resolve the differences between the two airlines?
If we knew, we'd tell you.
Well, you should know though, shouldn't you?
I think... No, I mean, obviously we're going to do our best over the next few days to try to sort all this out once and for all, and we are in talks, which is very important, I think.
Well, goodbye.
But the talks didn't progress as Richard might have liked.
Baltimore, they've got 24 hours to come up with a number.
Yes, if we haven't heard from them something sensibly within the next 24 hours, then there's no point in carrying on talking, in our opinion.
BA offered Virgin a compensation deal of £9 million, but in return, they demanded a gagging order.
Great deal warmer than it is out here, anyway.
If I may give you an example, and they are saying that should they access our computer information again in the future, that
they can comment on it, but the rest of the world could comment on it, but Virgin couldn't comment on it. And in the end, we just decided that that to be gagged is not worth a settlement.
In one of the most bitter legal battles in aviation history, British Airways finally admitted defeat. Counsel for BA apologised unreservedly for the alleged dirty tricks campaign against Virgin Atlantic, and also agreed to pay damages of £500,000 to Branson and £110,000 to his airline, and the incurred legal costs of £3 million.
Obviously delighted with today's result and hope that it will bring in a new era of fair competition in British aviation history in the future.
Richard's next move was to form an alliance with American airline Delta. The deal would make Virgin more competitive with British Airways by gaining access to 200 cities in the United States.
Means that we can look after the quality aspects for our passengers. At the same time, it gives us a big brother in America who can benefit our passengers quite considerably.
Branson formed another alliance in 1999, but this one came at a price. He sold a 49% stake of Virgin Atlantic to Singapore Airlines.
Virgin Atlantic will, until my dying days, will always be my baby. I mean, it's something which we started 15 years ago. We built up. It's been through many battles, and we would never give up on it.
The deal was worth £600 million for Branson. He pledged to reinvest the cash injection into Virgin Atlantic, Virgin Mobile Phones, and Virgin's internet services. The fuel price jump brought on by the First Gulf War was a major problem for Virgin. Following the 9/11 terrorist attacks in Washington and New York, the worldwide airline industry went into free fall. Branson petitioned the British Transport Secretary to gain government support.
On the state of the British airline industry, the government have said that they do not want to see the British aviation industry in any way damaged against the foreign carriers, American industry or European industry, and they will do everything they can to help.
As Branson's airline soaked up more and more cash, its bankers were losing patience. He sold Virgin Music to EMI for $1 billion and kept Virgin Atlantic flying. It was a harrowing decision to sell the label that he'd invested over 20 years of his life developing. But the funds gave Branson the freedom to chart his own course without bankers yapping at his heels. The following year, Richard made another optimistic, bold decision. He invested in 10 of the world's longest airliners. The giant 340-600 Airbus carries nearly 500 passengers and is also quieter than other big jets.
Virgin Atlantic's taking on the biggest plane in the world, or the longest plane in the world, and buying 10 of them, I think, is a good indication of the fact that we feel that there is a recovery on the way. We're finding that economy class passengers are now up and flying again, but they are sensitive to, they want 4 engines, they want young planes, they want to know that safety is paramount in an airline's agenda.
During the Gulf War, Virgin flew several humanitarian flights into Iraq. Branson personally delivered and donated aid on the first civilian plane to land in Basra after the war began. Iraqi doctors and health workers that fled Iraq were desperate to return home and help with the relief effort.
What Virgin Atlantic is planning to do is to compile a list through Virgin.com of all the doctors and nurses and sanitation experts, etc., who would be willing to give up some of their time to go to Iraq and help get Iraq back on its feet again.
This entrepreneur come adventurer has been chasing and breaking records for decades. He thrives on the challenge and the rush of adrenaline that comes with each endeavour. In 1985, Branson made a record-breaking attempt to cross the Atlantic by boat in his Virgin Atlantic Challenger, but it capsized. An RAF helicopter rescued Richard and his crew. When at first you don't succeed, try again. He set off the following year for another transatlantic attempt, aboard the Virgin Atlantic Challenger Mark II. Under the close watch of crew and family at the Oxford Street control room, tensions grew when communications were lost.
Would you like to talk to him on the boat?
Yes.
What would you say?
Okay. What are you doing on the boat?
Daddy was doing just fine on the boat. With lessons learned and kind winds this time, Branson conquered the Atlantic and beat the record by 2 hours.
We ought to be feeling very tired.
You've got the idea.
Wonderful, I think. Well, it's very difficult to describe.
The blue ribbon record for the fastest passage across the Atlantic was smashed by 18 hours in 1989 by US millionaire Tom Gentry.
Congratulations, you made it!
Thank you. You sound more peppy than I am, I'll tell you.
Richard was there to congratulate his rival in true Branson style.
I'll take my hat off them because they're having joined a really bad weather last year and they're really romped home. We can fair and square, I'm afraid.
After hosing down Tom with bubbly, both skippers ended up in the drink. Now Branson had more lofty ambitions for crossing the Atlantic. He would take to the sky in a hot air balloon.
I couldn't put a percentage chance in it. I mean, but I think if the weather's kind to us, we have a very good shot.
Richard succeeded in his crossing of the Atlantic despite crash landing just off Ratlin's coast in Ireland. Islanders rescued him and pilot Pearl Lindstrom from the sea.
Initially we went out to see what assistance we could render to Mr. Branson and his partner there. We realised then that they had been picked up safely from the water.
Branson later returned and donated £25,000 to the Ratlin Island Trust.
Well, it looks remarkably similar to the last time.
Branson and Pearl Lindstrom teamed up again in 1991. They attempted to become the first to cross the Pacific in a hot air balloon. The ambitious route was plotted to take off in Japan and land in North America.
We learned a lot from the transatlantic. Anyway, I hope we learned a lot. And I think that although we were given the record for the transatlantic crossing, I think we feel that the job wasn't quite finished somehow. I mean, the endings was slightly unfortunate. The Pacific has never been attempted before in a hot air balloon. We believe it to be possible that a hot air balloon can cross the Pacific.
Richard may be a great adventurer, but he is an even better marketer of his brand. With the Virgin logo hugely prevalent on his record attempts, he gains more free global publicity than Virgin could buy. Just prior to crashing in Ireland, he radioed his ground crew, asking what the media coverage was like.
Every venture I go into has a mixture of a business side and a pleasurable side. The wonderful thing about this particular adventure is that it will be a great personal challenge. It will help our businesses. Our airline flies to Japan, our airline will be flying to Los Angeles, and at the same time we can use it to get a message across about the environment. And we're carrying a large sign on the balloon to do with saving the planet. We are facing now a potential world catastrophe with the cutting down of the forests, and I think we can play a very small bit in trying to increase public awareness on that particular issue. There is a possibility that if the damage continues in the ozone layer, that a trans-Pacific crossing will not be possible 10 years from now or 20 years from now. So we will be able to do a certain amount of tests, which we can send back to the Science Museum and send back to the Japanese for them to examine and see just how bad things are deteriorating at that sort of level.
But why would a man with so much to live for repeatedly put his life in acute danger?
I enjoy life enormously and have no wish to depart from it. You know that there are dangers all the time, and you're going to be ready for those dangers. And I actually think it's more likely that that I will survive my life having doing adventures like crossing the Pacific than I will necessarily do my driving down something like the motorway.
What's been done about parachutes? Apparently the wall is a 2GQ times 850.
Richard and Per Lindstrom successfully became the first to cross the Pacific in a hot air balloon. They travelled 6,700 miles in 47 hours, breaking the world distance record and hitting speeds of 245 miles per hour.
One of the most magnificent adventures I think anybody can have in their lifetime. So look forward to seeing it in about 3 weeks' time.
The pair then made several unsuccessful attempts to be the first to circumnavigate the globe in a balloon. Undeterred, Branson switched his global circumnavigation ambitions to a solo non-stop plane flight and enlisted millionaire adventurer Steve Fawcett to pilot the mission.
I'm absolutely delighted to announce that Virgin Atlantic has launched the, hopefully, first solo-piloted aircraft, the Virgin Atlantic Global Flyer, to fly non-stop around the world, a record nobody has actually ever attempted before. Like Concorde, the Virgin Atlantic Flyer would be a sleek and slim aircraft, but unlike Concorde, it will also be super fuel efficient. And in the future, it is designed to capture data and damage to the ozone layer without adding to it. This plane will fly around the world, if it's successful, only using 9 tons of fuel. Our other planes would use about 1,500 tons of fuel. So it shows that the enormous leap forward in technology.
As reserve pilot, Richard would be land-based for this historic flight, but had great faith in Fawcett's experience of being the first to fly solo around the globe in a balloon.
Yes, it's not only a solo flight, but it's in an unpressurized capsule, so this is doing it without pressurization.
And respect of Steve's numerous aviation and sailing records.
I think my past experience is essential because I have to fly solo. I have to have the experience of doing all the functions, the navigation, the flying, and the endurance of doing something on my own for over 3 days.
Despite a serious fuel system problem over Hawaii, favourable tailwinds helped Steve to complete the non-stop round-the-world flight in just over 67 hours. There to greet him at Kansas Airport where the mission started and concluded was a jubilant Branson.
Never out of reach. But you wanna be. Thought I'd seen it all.
We're celebrating the 20th anniversary of Virgin Atlantic that started 20 years ago today with one plane. And we're celebrating it in a rather sort of fun, bizarre way. We're trying to beat the record for the fastest crossing of the Channel, an aqua, or by a car and a boat, all rolled into one, and this is it.
The amphibious car seats 3 people and can travel at more than 100 miles per hour on land and 30 miles per hour at sea. In true James Bond style, Branson slashed 4.5 hours off the previous amphibious record for crossing of the English Channel. The phrase "the sky's the limit" rings true for most of us, but Richard's imagination extends far beyond the clouds. He ambitiously formed Virgin Galactic, the world's first space line, a space tourism company that aims to take paying passengers into space.
As a young man, I watched people landing on the moon, and I dreamt one day of going into space, but it was just too expensive. And I met an incredible engineer called Bert Rutan. He had come up with the idea of Spaceship One. And Spaceship One did 3 test flights to prove the technology could work. So Spaceship One is actually above us. This is about 3 times as big as Spaceship One. And and it's really pushing the boundaries as well, pushing the boundaries literally into space.
Twin fuselage planes named White Knight lift the passenger spacecraft to about 50,000 feet, then detach from the plane and blast into space.
The beauty of White Knight 2 and Spaceship 2 is that they can help change our relationship with space, achieving an era where accessibility becomes a commercial and scientific norm rather than an exception. With the end of the oil era approaching and climate change progressing faster than most models have been predicting, the utilization of space is essential not only for communications, but also for the logistics of survival through things such as weather satellites, agricultural monitoring, GPS, and climate science.
Branson signed a deal to sell 32% of Virgin Galactic to a Middle Eastern investment fund, giving the venture an influx of $280 million.
I never actually think about the investments I do. I think about creating things that I can be proud of. And I think generally if you can create something you can be proud of, it's likely to be successful. And you know, I think there are so many, millions and millions of people who'd love the chance to go into space, and it needed private enterprise to make that possible.
Perhaps not everyone has $200,000 to buy a ticket.
Fasten your seatbelts and prepare for liftoff.
But Doug Ramsberg's dream came true when Branson gave him a ticket for winning a competition.
Doug Ramsberg of North Glen, Colorado.
Congratulations.
You know, you look up at the stars and think one day, and here the day has come that, a common person can fly into space.
My ultimate dream is that in time we'll be able to bring the prices down and down and down, so that literally, millions of people will have the chance to experience space.
Branson loves competition and is a passionate sports fan. He has invested millions into Virgin's participation in Formula One. Richard is handy with a tennis racket and always comes out to play when Wimbledon rolls around.
About 5 years ago, we were thinking, what's Wimbledon missing? And it's missing a great party. There is no party for the tennis stars, for the women's stars, for the men's stars. So we thought, let's do it. And screw it, let's do it.
The world's best tennis players, including Venus and Serena Williams, joined Branson at London's Kensington Roof Gardens and danced the night away. Virgin Atlantic has been chosen as the official airline of the European Ryder Cup team. Branson is always proud to display the Ryder Cup trophy in the Virgin Atlantic clubhouse at Heathrow. Richard was a key player in London's bid to win the biggest game of all, the 2012 Olympic Games.
Australia is the best example of where they bid for the Olympics, and it did an enormous amount for the country. And if getting the Olympics does an enormous amount for a country and an enormous amount for a city, Sydney, then obviously it helps business enormously as well.
From his home in Oxfordshire, he played host to more than 100 of the UK's business leaders that brainstormed the economic prospects of hosting the Games. Branson's vibrant public persona has been pivotal in building the iconic global Virgin brand into what it is today. As one of the world's most famous and entertaining entrepreneurs, it's not surprising that movie studios and Hollywood have come calling. He appeared in the James Bond film Casino Royale, a Superman feature, and cameos in Baywatch and Friends. Branson was the star of the reality TV series The Rebel Billionaire. In the show, he takes 16 would-be entrepreneurs around the world and tosses them into challenging situations.
I'm looking for somebody who would be capable of running a group of companies like Virgin, and someone who can pull out the best in people.
Using his fame with business opportunities was the main motivation for making the series.
They pay well, but I'm not actually doing it for the money. I've given the money to a charitable foundation I feel strongly about, but it's, it is a good way out.
思念是一种很玄的东西，如影。
Get myself in the Virgin brand better known in America.
The Rebel Billionaire series was screened on the Fox network in the States, attracting an audience of over 5.5 million viewers. It also aired in 19 countries around the world where Branson does business. Richard is one of a kind and is a role model that inspires the next generation of entrepreneurs. Daniel Riley started Nexus Airways at the age of 18. Like Branson, he took on the major players with only one plane.
If somebody offered me and said, you will be next to Branson, I'd say marvellous, but...
At the age of 21, Alex Chew launched the $1 Million homepage. He sold 1 million pixels for $1 each, and you guessed it, he became a millionaire.
Richard Branson is probably one of my biggest idols, a British entrepreneur who's gone worldwide and been very successful.
He has also won the respect of his peers. In 2007, he was ranked in the top 100 most influential people in the world by Time magazine.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously it's a great honour, a big responsibility. I have to go and make sure the influence is a positive influence. We'll see how we go.
The United Nations believes his contribution has been a positive one. They honoured him with a Citizen of the World Award for his support of environmental and humanitarian causes. Sir Richard Charles Nicholas Branson refuses to follow convention, pursues and achieves his dreams, and seems to have more fun than most, while truly living a remarkable life.